The protection of weaker parties, protection against money laundering and terrorism financing are explicitly disregarded.
It's even more striking if we take into account that numerous studies have shown that notaries significantly reduce legal costs both for the state as well as for individuals and businesses. One of the latest concepts of the World Bank tries to pursue in this regard is the concept of a one-stop shop. This is a single office where parties willing to start an enterprise can get all their formalities done. Ladies and gentlemen, what they believe to be a new idea is actually a concept that has been practiced in the tradition of the civil law for centuries, in particular in the field of real estate law, namely by notaries. Actually, it is the notary's function that is best described as a one-stop shop. Preparation, the recording, and also with the implementation of a contract, including securing the performance of contractual obligations, this is payment of price, transfer of title, and registering the transfer of title in the relevant registers. With a strong notariat, the state, in particular the agent, need to employ only one reliable public professional who will advise them on all aspects of the transaction. As the notary is elected and supervised by the state, the parties can rely on him, on her, or her, without the need of further verification. The costs of the notary are determined by law, and as they are based on the value of the transaction, they are accessible to all citizens, so that parties are not burdened with further negotiations. The Notariat therefore ensures a fair and equal access of all citizens with regard to some of the most essential aspects of the law, in particular in realizing their rights in real estate and succession cases. All these advantages are real advantages and not ideological advantages. As notaries who are contributing every day to the building and maintenance of reliable legal structures, we know about these advantages. But when these concepts are challenged, we do not reply with ideological concepts, we prefer to rely on more substantive criteria, namely evidence. In the past, many studies have been conducted on the value of notarial authentic instruments for an economy, and they have unanimously reached the conclusion that a system of preventive justice, which includes a strong role of the notariat, particularly in real estate and company law, is not only preferable in order to reduce the caseload of courts and protect the rights of individuals, but leads to much lower costs for the citizens. A study conducted by Professor Knieper, which has been translated up to now into 6 languages, unfortunately not yet into the Mongolian language, but it exists in English, French, in Serbian, in Macedonian, and Chinese and Russian. Mr. Knieper shows that the total yearly costs for legal advice in France and Germany, jurisdictions that are based on requirements of notarial authentication, add up to 1.2% of the GDP, while in the UK, the jurisdiction that has no effective system of preventive justice, they add up to the double number, to 2.3%. Hence, while the average citizen of England has to spend €460 per year for legal advice, and the average citizen of the United States $1,353, the average citizen of Germany or the Netherlands had costs of less than €200. Moreover, the study conducted by Professor Knieper, perhaps some of you still remember Professor Knieper, he's one of the fathers of the Mongolian civil code. The study of Professor Knieper shows that the litigation quota regarding the real estate transfers differs extremely between common law countries, where such transfers are executed by attorneys, and civil law countries, where only notaries are competent for the implementation. In the US jurisdiction, in which there are no notaries and real estate transactions are affected by attorneys, for the years 2012 to 2015, real estate matters accounted for nearly 15% of all claims against lawyers. That is the second most important category of malpractice claims behind personal injury claims. By contrast, litigation based on real estate transfer contracts in countries with an exclusive competence for notaries accounted for less than 1%, nearly 15% in the countries of the Latin Notariat, less than 1%. On an average, in Germany it is less than 0.1%. I think these numbers speak for themselves. Now I will continue with some considerations about the digitalization of the Notariat in transformation states. Many countries of the Western world have already begun to develop and apply digital procedures in the notariats many years ago. In transformation states, for example, Central Asia, in the South Caucasus, and in the new republics of the former Yugoslavia, this development began only a few years ago. This is certainly due to the fact that in these countries the notariats had to be established first. In many cases, the corresponding developments are not yet completed. One reason is that an assignment of sufficient competencies to the notariat, which could ensure its economic viability, is still missing. Another reason often is a lack of sufficient qualitative prerequisites for the professionals, a lack of numerical limitation of the notarial posts, which is indispensable for the professional practice of a notary, and a lack of efficient strategies for damage prevention through liability insurances and disciplinary control. As a matter of fact, we can observe, in parallel to the efforts of coping with these problems, an increasing orientation towards digital procedures in the notariat. The reasons for this parallel structure are diverse. First, the demand to digitize the notariats as far as possible is primarily a concept component of the World Bank and the simultaneously operating US NGOs to introduce common law structures in these countries. The more the notariat is digitized, the more the performance of the single professionals recedes into the background. And the task of the bar becomes larger, be it in the context of the contractual design and execution of more complex transactions, or the decision of erroneous transactions by the courts. Then, unfortunately, quite a few states take the view that the competence of the notariat is restricted to formal criteria. This is identification, use of standard contracts, and information on public authorities, which could simply be digitalized just as well. They do not realize that the notarial and register systems need to be organized in a future-oriented way in order to meet the requirements of the developing social and economic structures. Such positions are encouraged by commercial IT providers who find an open market here, as the competent administration usually neither have the know-how nor the necessary qualified personnel. Finally, we can observe that it is often not taken into account that digitization is a purely technical process and not a master plan for solving substantive problems. The application of digital procedures in the Notariat and the public registers is helpful and inevitable, but we can neither give up the mentioned basic requirements for a functioning notarial system, nor its services for the entire legal system in the states with a market economy only for this reason. We always try to give the representatives of the competent ministries of justice an idea of how to define the role of a functioning notariat in countries that are in a situation of economic transformation. If the notariat is organized as an institution without obligations of legal advice or contractual design, in real estate transactions, for instance, these institutions will be rendered redundant within a relatively short period of time. The reason for this is that the competences assigned to the notariat would simply consist in the identification of the contracting parties, the completion of standard contracts, and possibly the information of public authorities. In the medium term, however, it will be possible to completely digitalize these functions. In a pluralistic society with differentiated economic structures and a high level of consumer protection, the notary is generally confronted with individual demands and wishes of the involved parties when he or she draws up drafts of authentic instruments. This means that in the long term, also in the transformation states that develop systems with a market economy, impartial intermediaries who provide services of legal advice and contractual design will be indispensable. In sustainably successful economies, notaries have essential functions in the field of real estate transfers and investments, and also in the field of the entire company law, including the sale of shares in private limited companies. And notarial authentication is compulsory in these legal areas. As intermediaries between the interests of the contracting parties, as grantor of a legally certain contract design, and as interlocutors for the National Tax Authority, they play a key role within the area of their assigned legal competences. These arguments are often approved by the countries concerned, but unfortunately, corresponding consequences are not drawn. The reason for this is that, apart from the pressure exerted by the World Bank and the other mentioned organizations, these countries often rely on short-term results, inter alia, because of the frequent change of the responsible persons. With regard to the notariat and its not always satisfying competences, these results are regularly tried to be obtained by means of liberalization and digitization. Finally, I would like to comment in detail on several technologies. For technical or economic reasons, most transformation states are not capable to store notarial documents electronically in a secure way. They regularly choose the so-called cloud as a storage location. It is certainly a better opinion or a better option to store paper documents in the cloud than to leave them to an unknown destiny after the termination of the professional activity, which can end rather abruptly in some countries. But it should be noted that the cloud is not a secure storage place. We can distinguish the following technical processes. In order to enable the storing process, the document has to be electronically encrypted. In the ideal case, encryption complies with the highest security standards existing for the moment. The transmission to the final storage location is done electronically. The transmission path itself
is not necessarily safe. Especially the electronic individual transmission stations repeatedly have security gaps. But even if an unauthorized person knows about the security gaps, she is not able to get access to the encrypted document. Still, due to the security gap, an unauthorized person can divert the encrypted document to a separate server. As the encryption and all of the decryption technologies accelerate constantly, the secrecy of the stored document is not ensured. Furthermore, and this is the more important argument, there is a purely physical component. The data centers where the storage places are located often have their seats abroad, for example, in India, China, the USA. It is not possible to ensure that these data centers are not cut off, disconnected, or destroyed because of political changes or natural disasters in these countries. So the Federal Chamber of Germany, German notaries decided to build the necessary centers, storing centers themselves. We decided to do it ourselves. Blockchain. Blockchain systems make use of a digital environment which, at least in theory, makes it nearly impossible to manipulate stored data. As a consequence, they promise secure transmission paths without intermediaries being necessary for the process. They are based on digital structures combining elements of cryptography or signature technology with the distribution and the storage of data on different data carriers. Smart contracts, in addition, are based on a similar idea. The concept of smart contracts is to structure in a digitalized business environment transactions like computer programs that control themselves after certain criteria have been checked. These transactions are controlled by decentralized autonomous systems which communicate with each other via the internet. In the media, you can read time and again that property transfers and the corresponding transactions with banks, tax authority and other administrative units, as well as with the land register, could be concluded via smart contracts. Both concepts question the role of the notary in a completely digitized working environment. But, as always the case with innovations that are part of the digital hype cycle, a minimum of rational reflection is necessary in order to assess the appropriateness of such procedures. At the moment, the probability is very low that these technologies can effectively produce the claimed results because they are not able to reflect the economic and psychological context that is the basis of the complexity of the simplest transactions. Until now, demonstrations or studies were only conducted in laboratories with elected and constructed cases of significantly low complexity which do not represent at all the reality of real estate transactions. But apart from a lacking maturity level of these technologies, there are many fundamental problems that question or even refute the assumption that notaries or the administration of public registers could be abolished by these technologies in the foreseeable future. The necessity to have a data storage system with reliable information in which one must check the reliability of output data. This is how it works in the whole Anglo-American legal sphere. There, the land register and the business register, if they exist at all, only have a very limited informative value. In well-organized civil law systems do not need blockchain-based data storage system. The preference of blockchain systems over public registers and the notary as an intermediary is based on an almost naive misbelief that by means of digitization it is possible to deal with all social problems. There are always a lot of other problems relating to transactions which are not of a technical nature and, as a consequence, cannot be solved by technical problems. I come to an end. Time is over. I shift a little part of my manuscript. The impact of new technologies, digitization in general, blockchain, smart contracts, and also artificial intelligence on our profession and the continued existence of public registers is hardly predictable. But one thing is certain: the human factor cannot be eliminated. On the contrary, especially in Western societies, we are witnessing an increase of individual demands of market participants in response to the increasing complexity of economic reality. The challenges for the state arising from this will not be accommodated by the means of technical procedures. At this point, we need solutions, figuring on a higher level, thus as permanent improvement and clarification of rules and standards accepted by the society, which must be communicated and applied by qualified persons. Until now, the Latin Notariat and public registers have always been capable to adapt perfectly and promptly to social and economic changes in the world. We, the notaries, we will continue to follow this path. Our professional performance profile will continuously be directed towards the needs of a success-oriented market economy, without forgetting that there are humans behind every documented transaction and every legal drafting. Digitization is a necessary process we have to integrate into our professional procedures, but it is only a process. The human factor, the shaping of well-balanced, conflict-free, transparent and sustainable legal conditions will always be the essence of our professional activity. Thank you for your attention.
Холбооны улаанд Герман улсын нотариатын танхимын Илтгэгч, олон улсын нотариатын холбооны өдөрцүүлдэг гишүүн, олон улсын нотариатын хамтран ажиллагааны комиссийн дижитал За Рихард Bock тань Монгол улсын нотариатын тухайд нэмэлт өөрчлөлт оруулах тухайдын төсөл байгаа. Асуулт сэдвийн талаар бэлтгэл тавьсанд баярлалаа. За дараагийн Илтгэгч